guys. So let's just get started and people can kind of just roll in when they come. I'm going to open up the chat just in case anyone has anything they'd like discussed. You can put it in the chat and we'll get to it. But otherwise, let's just take a breath and step out of the story of our day. Let your attention just naturally rise up to the forehead and crown. And let your eyes just sort of take in the entire room at once. In the beginning, if you're having trouble making that shift, you can even just kind of imagine that you're stepping into an elevator in your spine and you're just riding it up to the level of the forehead, just kind of pulling you out of your lower self. And up to those higher centers, and then the doors open and you just step right out. Okay. So attention at the forehead and crown, eyes soft and taking in the entire room at once. Let your ears listen to all the sounds at once. And from that open, engaged place, begin to breathe. As you breathe in, you are aware that you are inhaling, you are feeling your ribs expand, your lungs expand. As you exhale, you're riding the breath all the way down. And you're starting to notice in between the breaths, in between the inhale and the exhale, a gap of open space in that transition moment. Let's just sit and breathe like that for a little while. Anyone new who just came in, you're welcome to put something in the chat if there's something you'd like us to discuss tonight. Otherwise, we'll just see what comes. Okay, Suki, we'll take a look at that. Be with the simplicity of the breath. so that you can really open up. The spiritual parts of you only open in moments of stillness. Well, your awareness of them only opens in stillness. From that stillness, your personal flow gets restored. All the energies in your body start to move as they were intended to move. At first, it pushes up against blockages and makes you uncomfortable, but ultimately it's the reason you feel better at the end of a class like this. So Suki has asked a question saying, I want to eat far, far less sugar than I eat. How can I use meditation to reach this goal? The beauty of meditation is that it expands awareness. You come to actually understand how you're interacting with everything in your world. And you come to understand the deep ocean of connections that make up the automatic components of your personal story. Those parts of you that are just functioning seemingly on their own. Our cravings just seem to arise from nowhere. There can be many reasons that we have a craving, that we have a frenetic need to take comfort in something specific. But usually it happens when a certain step was missed when we were developing. You as a consciousness are plopped into this world of pluses and minuses, pushes and pulls, likes and dislikes, pains and pleasures. It's a game. And at the heart of that game is balance. Everything is trying to find balance and stability. Even stability has to be balanced with movement, otherwise it becomes stagnant. So there's just this sweet spot that life is always aiming for, where you have just enough want to pull you forward, but you also have enough that you feel comfortable where you're placing your feet. in our adult life, when we have really, really strong cravings for things, it's usually we're trying to create a feeling that should exist on its own. A feeling of comfort, a feeling of home, a feeling of acceptance and fulfillment usually is what we're reaching for when we reach for something sweet. And maybe that's something that you were missing at some certain phase of your life, you know, and that's not to place the blame on anyone in particular. You know, there might have been many different circumstances that kept you from feeling like you were getting that. But it creates kind of a deep wedge of lack that then follows you into your adult life. A sense of lack, I should say. It's not actually a legitimate lack. It's a story of lack. But a story that's been told so many times that it becomes a kind of core belief inside of you. It's so strong for some people that when it gets triggered, it actually puts you into a headspace that it's almost like it puts a filter out in front of you where you can only see things that justify getting that thing that you think you need. And a storyline that nothing's going to be okay until you get it. We've all experienced that on some level. Some people experience it to a much stronger degree than other people can picture, but it's a part of everyone's experience. What meditation gives you is strong moments outside of that. It gets rid of all of those filters so that you can just be present with what is without needing anything, without wanting anything. And in that moment is that peace you were missing when you were a kid. In that moment is that warmth and that good feeling that you were missing when you were a kid. And if you go for that long enough and you do it with your eyes wide open, you'll come to understand, at least intellectually at first, that if sitting here and opening up and leaving the story behind grants you the fulfillment you were trying but failing to get in the story, then maybe this idea that you were missing anything was just a story. Now, these physical bodies, they're habit-driven, and those habits are built from the story. So there's this deep integration of your hardware into these stories that you've invested in over a lifetime. And so it can all feel very physiologic. But at the end of the day, if you change the story, the hardware changes. You know, for me, it's not sweets. For me, it's things like not wanting to go do something that I know I'm supposed to go do. You know, I remember one of the first times I experienced it. I was living on Orcas Island, and I was lying in bed, and I had an unbelievable amount of resistance to getting up and driving to my teacher's house where we would sit in meditation every night. You know, and it was one of those things where it's like, You could skip it and almost nothing would happen, you know. But I was there to be with her. I had moved there to work with her. But it was just this unbelievable fatigue. And it was so real. And it was so physical. And it was mixed in with all this brain fog that also felt, you know, clinical. It felt pathological. And this idea that that's only going to get worse, right? I mean, I don't have any energy. How am I going to make anything happen? You know, I should just skip tonight. And I remember there was this moment where I just decided, no, I'm going to go. I'm going to go and just, you know, I'm going to show up. I'm going to walk through the steps and I'm going to go. And I remember the second I made that decision and meant it, literally my physiology changed on a dime. I was crystal clear. I had plenty of energy. I was no longer tired. All these things that seemed so real were just gone in an instant. You know, meditation makes it so that you actually notice those shifts and you look at what that implies. You know, what it implied was that none of that was any more real than a story in my head. Even though you probably could have tested my blood and found chemicals consistent with fatigue. You know? You could have done a before and after blood draw, and I'm sure the metabolites would have looked completely different. But that actually doesn't make it real. It's still just a story. And it can change on a dime. But if you're not meditating on a regular basis, moments like that, they just go over your head, or you never even bother to get yourself up. If there's something you feel like you have to have that you know you probably shouldn't have, there's a story that you have to have it. No, I'll only feel better when I get it. Nope, I can't manage the feeling if I don't get it. None of those things are actually true. Step one is being willing to actually feel the thing you don't want to feel. Step one is just being willing to be uncomfortable. What if this is just okay for tonight? I don't have to do this again tomorrow, but what if right now I just go ahead and I don't do that thing that I think is going to fix everything? What if I just let this be okay? And I think what you'll find is that when you really mean it, that feeling will lessen dramatically, if not completely disappear. And at the end of that night, you'll go to bed and you'll wake up the next day. And the next time that you feel like you're not going to be able to make it through without grabbing for this experience that you know you shouldn't have, you'll be able to ask yourself, well, do I have any evidence that I don't need this? That I actually would be okay without it? And the answer will now be yes. I made it through that entire night. I went to bed, I woke up and lived a day, and I was fine. Eventually, the feeling went away for a while. But until that moment comes, what you have is, well, when I sit in meditation and I really just let go of everything, everything I'm hoping that cookie's going to give me is present. You know, the product Listerine was created by a company that created both the disease and what the product was meant to treat. So, like, they created a word, halitosis, which was a word for bad breath. And they did that so that they could sell you an antidote to halitosis. Before that, nobody even really had a word for it. The cookie's kind of the same thing, you know? The sugar is kind of the same thing. It is both the problem and the antidote. Or you could just step off that coin altogether. That coin of having versus not having the cookie, that could be set to the side, and you could just be out of that story. Anyone who's ever been addicted to anything and gotten over it understands that process. It takes a bold person, I think, to do it. And I think there's plenty of times where bold people relapse. But the idea is to approach it with clarity and honesty. Not just believing every word that goes through your head. Just because you feel it doesn't make it true. Just because you think it doesn't make it true. The prison of your life is built of all the things you've decided are true that you haven't challenged. Walk up to the walls of those prisons and challenge some of those invented truths. If for no other reason than to build a bigger prison. But you bust through enough walls and you'll come to realize the walls aren't real. Then when you come to that realization, it's like, okay, so what do I do with my life now? Teachings like this sound very trite, but every single person in this room and anyone who will ever listen to this has a very structured internal world filled with drives and limitations. And every one of those drives and limitations are held in place by a misguided sense of truth, a misguided sense of reality. The power of challenging that is huge. Are there any questions about that? Once you really know it, once you really have worked with it a lot, kind of walked through a bunch of your fears and just kind of come to understand the game. It's a really different kind of place to be in. You know, you're in the world, but it's like, okay, so what am I going to build? What would be of use? You know, for a while you just start kind of going, okay, what other stuck areas am I not even thinking about that I could go knock down? And so you start walking after some of those. You start looking at the dynamics of your relationships and, you know, areas where you're overperforming and underperforming, participating in someone else's dysfunction. But more and more, once you get it, you just start putting it all down. And it's hard because you're in a world deeply connected to people who have not put anything down. They still want to do all kinds of things that don't really matter to you. You still have to go do them. But your journey at that point becomes something much more centralized. It becomes like perfecting yourself into the center of a hurricane where everything is still and aligned. You step into the stories of the world, but you end up holding a hard line of integrity. And when you find people who are pushing the walls of the hurricane in order to manipulate things in their favor at the expense of other people, you find ways to kind of hold the line so that things like that are less successful, or at least more visible. That opens up a whole world of, frankly, fierce and ugly encounters if you're really in it. Parasites get upset if you rob them of their meal. But you just start to think, there's so many people lost in this game. What if I just go ahead and piss people off? Hold up a mirror. And you become a teacher in that way. I think just about anybody at that point becomes a little cantankerous because you're just surrounded by people doing it wrong. And it would be fine that they're doing it wrong if they weren't suffering through all of it and causing suffering through all of it. And so you find yourself saying the things that nobody else will say. Beware of any teacher that doesn't do that. They're probably trying to sell you something. All right. Why don't we go back into meditation? Attention at the forehead and crown. And let's just step out of the stories of life and into this moment. Nothing to push or pull. Nothing to assign meaning to. those filters and be with this living moment. This moment burns like the flame of a candle. Step into its life. This is always here. It's not something I bring. It's always here. When your life is over and everything else disappears, this remains. Your stories, your perceptions are the source of your discomfort, the source of your fears. They all go with your life when you pass. But this is what remains. Freedom from all of that. Nothing to miss. Nothing to need. Meditation is death. It's also the clean slate of birth. It's the space between the ending and the beginning. space between everything. Experienced meditation is the knowledge that everything you experience in the story time of your life, the dream time of your life, is conjured and temporary. And because of that, it's also the knowledge that there's a million people you could be in any given moment. What relationship do you want to have with your food? Or with your partner? Or with your body? From meditation, because you know none of those stances on their own is real, you can give yourself to any of them. And when you do, watch your entire life reshape around it. But can you be that flexible? Can you let certain parts fall apart so that other parts can build? I have one part of my life right now that I've learned what I'm going to learn from it and tired of the culture of it. So I'm letting it fall apart. I'm making sure everything lands in the right place, but it'll open the door so that a completely new experience can build. There's that part of you that just wants to cling to the way things are and have the change simultaneously, and it doesn't work. It all has to be allowed to rearrange. It's a big picture. You can't see most of the parts of it. You have to just trust. Meditation gives you that power to shapeshift into something different and abide in that new form while the universe around you reshapes itself to make room for it. If you don't meditate, you won't know that it's not real. You'll believe too strongly. And so you'll never show yourself that. And you'll never really know it. Attention at the forehead and crown. Let's just be still outside of the story as you breathe in and breathe out. Okay, guys, this week, I'd like you to notice your own role in the feelings that you have. Your own storylines and thought processes and beliefs that cause you to feel the things you don't enjoy feeling. When you meditate, I want you to consider what it means that after sitting there for a few minutes, all those feelings and needs lift off of you. I know intellectually you understand the things I'm saying, but you need to show your body. So go really deep with it. What does it mean? What does it mean that when I sit down and just focus on my breath, all those other problems that are so real don't exist? Or at least not, they're not interpreted through my feeling body anymore. What does that mean for my role in those feelings? And just start playing with the dance between the reality you experience in meditation and the movement of the stories that you participate in. Any questions about that before we end for the night? I think that'd be a good exercise. All right, everybody. I will see you next Thursday. I hope you all have a great week.
Thank you.